Hello, everybody. I'm Nandini, and today I'm delighted to have with me Mrs. Brinda Karat ji, who is a very senior leader of Communist Party of India, Marxist, who has been a former Politburo member, one of the first female members of CPIM's Politburo, and she has also been a member of the Parliament in the past. Thank you so much, ma'am. It's an
Pleasure,
honor.
Nandini.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm today at the AK Gopalan Bhavan, and before I start, let me say that ma'am is a very humble lady because she has such a wide variety of past work behind her, and she has literally the entire media after her. But you won't see her giving interviews like other political people. She's a very humble lady. I'm really excited to meet you. Thank you for this interview. Since we're today at the AK Gopalan Bhavan, and AK Gopalan ji's name in legal field is associated with a very famous case, AK Gopalan versus the state of Madras. This case shaped the history of civil liberties in India, and it dealt with preventive detention laws. Today, during the election times, we see that the politicians, especially from the opposition, are being jailed. If not under the preventive detention laws or the PSA, under laws like PMLA or UAPA. What do you have to say on that? Do you find that blatant abuse of political power of laws like these?
I think that's a wonderful way to start an interview with A.K. Gopalan because it was a very, very historic case. And I think when you compare the time then with the time now, I think the difference was that at that time, um, we were really talking about the first big attack on a political leader in independent India. So that case had a very historic dimension because here you had a constitution which was to protect democracy. And at the first opportunity where the issue of civil liberties came, you arrested one of the topmost leaders, a communist leader, precisely because he was communist. And the charge against him was sedition. Today, if you look at it, it is mainly people working with the poor, Adivasis, Dalits, who are facing cases of sedition. You know, the case of Stan Swami, for example, the Christian priest who died in police custody because his one crime was that he was working among the poor and is accused of being a Maoist. So that's one case. Even today, we have absolutely false manufactured cases, just as the case against AKG. So that's one aspect, that there is still today a bigger direct attack on democracy. But when you talk about other laws being used against the opposition, that is true in the sense that where you feel that you've got to manipulate an electoral verdict, you find the BJP, you find this government, which anyway has nothing to do with the constitution. They've accepted the constitution. Who would use and misuse these laws. And I think the Supreme Court has, on many occasions, pointed out that the PMLA, this particular provision, is being wrongly used in some cases.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, today when we look at the communists, when we look at the left front, now there's a lot of division between the different parties. Like if we look at the CPIM, we have CPI, we have CPI-ML, then we have other parties in the left front. Do you think that the left front today is divided, and because of this, we are losing the vote share, and parties like the BJP are not, are able to take over us? Is that one of the reasons why?
No, I don't think so, because as far as electoral politics are concerned, by and large, the left has fought together. And we have tried to avoid any conflict of seats between left parties. So I think, as far as electoral politics are concerned, um, generally speaking, division among the left has not at all been an issue of the last 10 years. Earlier, certainly, it may have been, but definitely not in the 10 years or say now, what, 14 years that the BJP has been in power. And therefore, those issues of left disunity affecting electoral outcomes, I don't think that's relevant. But the issue of the entire left coming together as one party, I don't think that's really feasible, and I don't think right now that's a major agenda because historically there have been basic ideological differences about the revolution process in India, the classes who are part of the revolution, the classes who are part of the state which has to be opposed. These are many ideological issues which still persist. So the left, I think, tactically and strategically, has taken a very correct stand that look, let us unite on the issues which unite us. And let us work for a closer unity on the ground in struggle. So I think that is what we should be looking at right now. That is the left disunited in struggle? That's an important question. I think you yourself would answer, no, that's not true. So I think there are two aspects to this. We've seen the experience in Nepal, for example, where three different communist parties merged together. But that merger was really a merger for very, I would say, just electoral reasons, and it didn't last. They broke up again. So I think it's better to work towards unity on fundamental issues of struggle, and on ideological grounds where we have differences, we can debate, discuss, disagree, and yet work together. I think that's what's important.
Right now. And ma'am, I think on the point that the left is united, I think I attended a few sessions. The last session when I first met you, we saw that parties of the left, CPI, CPIM, CPIML, were all together
Yes.
for housing for all. So that's one thing. Now, ma'am, recently there was Fidel Castro G's sir's centenary celebration, centenary beginning celebration. So, Indian Communist Party is trying to gather support, is trying to work with International Communist Party because communism is a worldwide agenda. So, because you're such a senior leader of the Communist Party of India, Marxist, how do you see the worldwide support being gathered by Indian communists, and how do you see the types being linked? Are there any initiatives on these lines with Russia, China, Vietnam, Cuba, and other countries?
Well, that is an ideal. We are internationalists in the sense that just as capitalism is an international system of exploitation, socialism is an international system for liberation. That's what we strongly believe. And therefore, we always believe there are two camps, basically, and we are firmly on the camp of socialism. But I think what the communists have learned, at least we have learned, in our experience since we were birth in BC 1920, and the CPM was formed in 1964. Since then, what we have understood very clearly from our own experience, every country has got their own context. And we cannot have an international center which directs parties to act in a particular way. Because each communist party must work for revolution within their own context. For example, in India, we have the caste system. Which communist party across the world would understand how you fight caste? So, the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, the Vietnamese Revolution, Cuban Revolution, they all happened in a particular national context and very importantly, an international situation where they looked for support from other parties and from other working class movements. Now, we are for solidarity. We have contacts with different parties to try and understand their situation, not to dictate to each other. We can learn from each other to the extent we can. We can share experiences with each other to the extent we can. But there are certain issues in which communists across the world should unite, and there lies the weakness. For example, what US imperialism is doing today in Gaza supporting Zionist Israel, and the genocide in Palestine. I mean, it's unbelievable that this should be happening in our world today. So, this is an occasion where communists across the world must unite to fight for the rights of the people of Palestine. To the extent that we can do it, well and good. But I think we're very weak on that still at an international level. And look at Cuba. You mentioned Cuba. Cuba is being sanctioned so cruelly by the United States of America. Where's the solidarity for Cuba? That's a very relevant question you've raised. So, although we do try and we do have contacts, I think the strength of communists across the world to fight imperialism on specific issues like Palestine, like solidarity for Cuba, I think there's a lot to be done.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, now one more thing that I've observed is that when it comes to funding, I think when we look at parties like BJP or even Congress, they're fund rich. They receive lots of donations from all the corporate groups in the country. We don't. Communist Party of India, all Marxists, and every other party, we are firm on those lines. Now, do you think that the Election Commission of India should amend the electoral code or there should be a new law where the government collects the funds, the corporates do not directly fund parties, but there is a state office in which funds are collected and then those funds on equal basis have to be disseminated to the parties, say national parties or say state parties in states. But something on those lines will be developed so that parties like left parties like Communist Party of India, Marxist, we don't feel that other parties are cash rich because companies get CSR benefits. They get lots of benefits by funding these political parties. Now they don't want to fund a party like the Communist Party of India, Marxist, which is with whose agenda is to bring these companies down. Why would they want to fund them? So, do you think something on those lines? What do you think? What do you
Well, that's
recommend?
an extremely relevant question because state funding of elections has been a critical agenda of the left for the last, I think, 30 or 40 years since the first Dinesh Goswami committee was set up on electoral reforms. This was a very important point we raised at a time where corporate funding was not as blatant as it is today. I mean, what was that whole electoral fund system set up by the BJP? It was just a shameful quid pro quo between corporate India and the BJP in the ruling regime and other parties who would like to take corporate funds but who would not like to display the quid pro quo that they were giving them. So it is very important as part of the process of electoral reform in India for the government of India, for the Parliament of India to deeply consider the importance of a law which will ensure, at least as far as electoral funds are concerned, a level playing field between parties who have a particular percentage of the vote or who are newly coming in, where there could be new rules for them. But I think it is very, very important for India to have such a legislation. Because after all, if parliamentary democracy is going to become corporate led democracy, I mean, the Prime Minister keeps speaking about women led development, it's corporate led. Everything today is corporate led, whether you like to admit it or not. Let's not have corporate led democracy.
Ma'am, now you spoke about corporate-led democracy. Lots of artificial intelligence is coming into our country, and not just our country, everywhere in the world. Everything is getting automated. There is rampant unemployment. And if we see the data, the government is hiding the data, or maybe it's not public yet, but there's going to be lots and lots of unemployment in the coming years. In the movie I Robot, which was in the years 2000s, um, the professor, the creator of the artificial intelligence, he makes a prediction. He says that there's only one logical conclusion to this rise of robots and rise of artificial intelligence. That is revolution. But that might have been in a different context in the film, But I feel that yes, there's going to be only one logical conclusion, and revolution, communist revolution, where we'll see corporates being taken down, artificial intelligence being taken down, and like we saw in Lenin's time, Marxist time, we're going to see rise of the communists. So, how do you think the Communist Party of India could make use of this opportunity?
I don't think our fight is against technology. Artificial intelligence is not neutral in the sense that today artificial intelligence and all the technology associated with it is controlled. Now, the question is who controls it? You don't fight the technology because this is an expansion of the whole world of knowledge or the whole world of how you can use technology for humankind. The question is who controls it? So our fight is not against artificial intelligence. Definitely not. This is something which can help you if it's used for the correct reasons and not for maximization of profit.
Yes.
So, therefore, the struggle of communists to develop productive forces in the sense to develop how human beings produce the goods and services necessary for human existence. If labor can be lessened, but here what is happening? Human labor is being lessened due to unemployment, due to artificial intelligence and robotics replacing human labor, and human labor being forced into the ranks of unemployed and destitution. That's one scenario. On the other hand, there can be another scenario where labor reducing technologies are used for the betterment of humankind. If you could ensure incomes, if you could ensure basic human needs, if you could increase the levels of human living, that's wonderful if that's what technology can do. But question always we have to ask is who controls it and for what? Today, if artificial intelligence is being used for human destruction through technologies at war, if artificial intelligence is being used for privatization of healthcare and making it all the more expensive, if artificial intelligence is being used to reduce human labor for maximization of profit, well, that's your answer. Who controls it and for what?
On this question of who controls it or what, today we see a lot of misuse of generative AIs, especially by the corporates. Now, there's this concept of deepfakes, I'm sure you're aware of it, where fake reality could be perpetuated. Now, fake videos, fake images could be created. We see in our media as well that lots of fake news comes every time. I mean, there is also concepts where Google, where people like search engines are being paid to for search terms, certain search terms to show certain articles on top, which might not be the most correct picture. So how do you think?
That's,
So how do you think this could be corrected? Do you think certain laws should be brought in or certain
no, I
revolution?
mean, quite frankly, you can bring in all the regulations you want, but at the end of the day, who controls it? I mean, if hate is going to lead to profits, the profiteers are going to promote hate. They may not be ideologically committed to it, but if hate is producing profit, they're going to go for that. And if you look across the world, the way that fake news and fake propaganda is being multiplied countless times, the danger of how it's affecting politics and shaping and manufacturing public opinion is definitely something which is of very deep concern because we're seeing it in our own country. And we're seeing it not through just the use of artificial intelligence, but we're seeing it through the use of real people
True. Definitely.
who day in and day out is spouting a narrative which is so far removed from the truth and which conceals the truth. So I think the kind of propaganda we saw in Nazi Germany and how that influenced the German mind, I think with the consolidation of the right wing across the world, it sort of coincides with the development of all these productive forces, and not just coincide, but each using the other to promote the other. Corporates using fake news, which will help the right wing, and the right wing using corporates and their profits to promote themselves. So, this totally love fest between the corporates and right wing forces is something which is a deep concern, I think, to all citizens who believe in justice.
Ma'am, what do you think of private property abolition? Because I remember last time I heard you, you spoke of a communist party bringing laws on zamindari abolition or something like that. Was a long time back. But how do you think could today communist party, if we come in power, how do you see?
Well, I think the first thing is we still do believe in nationalization, but you can't have nationalization of everything. So I think the first point is the natural resources of India, which had been nationalized. For example, coal, for example, minerals, and the use of those coal and minerals. Today, there's absolute loot going on of our natural resources, which is also affecting climate change. And it's also affecting the environment, it's affecting everybody. And I think the depletion of natural resources, which are so important for national development, I think the first and the most important point is the nationalization of resources which are essential for the development of India rather than this kind of privatization spree that the present government is on. It started in the 1990s, but now it's reaching its absolute peak in every way. Imagine privatizing defense, and you are now opening up your entire defense sector, including use of artificial intelligence to countries who are they your permanent friends? I mean, what about Modi, Trump, those three? And today, what is happening? And you're just handing over uh, the entire defense system to American companies who are now going to open up nuclear systems to the American companies in the name of nuclear energy. So this the core of neoliberal policies, which is privatization and deregulation, the first thing that a government which is led by or which in which the communists play an important role would be certainly to protect the backbone of the Indian economy from private loot. That does not mean the nationalization of all private property. No, that is not at all the agenda right now. The agenda is to stop the privatization, the reckless privatization of natural resources and the backbone of the economy of strategic industries. The strategic industries on which India depends for its development. Now, for example, you've given over electricity to the private sector. What are they doing? What is Adani doing with the private sector? He's taken all the coal, he's taken all the water, you've displaced lakhs of people right there in Godda. And the agreement was for whom? Not for India. The agreement was to produce 100% electricity for Bangladesh. What are you doing? I'm just giving you an example. Yesterday, the Guwahati High Court in Assam was shocked to hear that 3,000 bighas of tribal area, pristine forest areas, was being handed over to Adani for a cement plant. Now, these are issues. Cement need not be privatized. I mean, cement need not be nationalized. But are you going to give cement plants land in a forest area without taking into account the Adivasis living there? Can you do that? This is what they've done in Assam. So there is an economic blueprint that we have, which is protection of the basic backbone of Indian industry, using resources for the development of the people with the understanding. that unless people have sufficient purchasing power to buy, even if you have a big section of your economy, which is the market economy, how is it going to work if people don't have money to buy? Who's going to manufacture for whom? For the 1% of the population. How many fridges can you have in a house?
Ma'am, so uh, we've spoken about the class divide. We've spoken how the capitalists are abusing the proletariat. We've spoken of the class divide. Now, what do you have to say about the communalist threat of RSS in our country?
I think that has made a. See, the RSS right from its birth, after all, when the RSS was born in 1925, was preceded by a very right wing approach. It's not as though suddenly the RSS came and it was part of a process. And it was also at that time that the British had faced the might of the unity of the Indian people. It was a time of rising, united struggles of the people of India, across caste, across community, mobilizing on a national platform for freedom. So they wanted to divide and rule. The old point about British Zamana ka vibhajan karo or raj karo, divide and rule. So at that time, the RSS, and if you look at RSS texts at that time, Savarkar and his entire understanding of Hindutva, which he saw not as a religion, nothing to do with Hindu beliefs, which crores of our country people believe in Hinduism, but he saw it as a road to power in which he saw Hindus and religion as a race and therefore divided people on the basis of religion. And according to him, unless you belong to one religion, you cannot live together in one nation. So the entire understanding of nationalism was shredded by Savarkar at a time when Indians were uniting as Indians into Hindu Muslim identity. And this is what Jinnah picked up later. It was Savarkar who first talked about two nations, and Jinnah picked it up from there. So both extremes, Jinnah on the one hand, and Savarkar's ideological understanding of what is Hindutva on the other. And that is what we see in 2025. There's no difference. So the RSS ideology is not for India. It's for an India which is Hindu. Now, India, if you look at religion, 85% of our people belong to a particular religion. But is that what India's character is? Religious? No. We have different languages, different cultures, different modes of dress, different ways of eating. Even within Hinduism, there's so many beliefs. There's so many different ways of worship. There's so many different ways of communicating with the God they believe in. There's so many different gods they believe in. You want to homogenize all that and make it Hindu? What is this? So this is destroying India. And from there communalism comes.
Ma'am, now I was at the just I was working under Justice Dipankar Datta sir during the election times, and there was this very interesting case I remember, the VVPAT judgment. Now, when we see the election results, there's some states like Bengal, there's some states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, the northeastern states, which used to be the fort of the Communist Party. And when we even look at them today, when I speak to people over there, though speaking to few people can never reach to that large conclusion, but they still have that communist bending. So, do you think that the leading government is doing some kind of chit with the EVMs?
See, EVMs, we want a more transparent approach to EVMs. We've always said that. That why can't you have the VVPAT? Why not? Where I vote, why shouldn't I have the proof that this is where I voted and this is the proof I have? You have technology to do it. Why can't it be done? They say it costs money, so you're spending so much money giving tax concessions to the rich. At least give a tax concession for democracy. Why can't you spend money for that? So I think VVPAT is very critical. And also the way that it is done. When you vote, the way I vote, I should first see that slip and then it can get registered in the CPU. Because otherwise there can be gadbad between the two. So there are two aspects which we've been raising. And now we say third aspect is in the public domain, which is the manipulation of voters' rules. I mean, the British at the time, the British, we talk about our great constitution, but at the end of the day, only 10 to 15% people could vote for those who were elected to the Constituent Assembly. So just 10 to 15 property people. The Constitution of India changed that, right? And made universal franchise. Now the BJP, by manipulating electoral rolls, wants to go back to removing the poor in the name of clean electoral rules. That's unacceptable.
Ma'am, the younger generation, when we look at our DYFI, when we look at our SFI wings, how do you think that we could strengthen these youth organizations? Because the youth in our country, when we go to colleges like JNU, they have a very left leaning, but that doesn't translate into the election results. The Indian youth forms a very big part of our population, and in the coming years would form a very big part of our voter population. So, how do you think the left could tap to them? How do you think we could, looking at other wings like ABVP or NSUI, we could strengthen our front? Because the youth definitely has a lot of leading for.
No, I think the youth is very important, but we don't have a kind of an instrumentalist approach to the youth. They're not really wings of the party at all. So they're very broad mass organizations, and young people of any political bent can come and join that for student issues, youth issues. It's through that movement that we have to see whether an ideology which is pro socialist, which is pro equality, which is pro democratic, which is pro secular, can we, through those movements, encourage the youth to become activists? From youth to activists. That's a transformation. And I think there, the importance of organizing the youth has been well understood, at least by the CPIM. Because now what we're trying to do is right through the party, we are trying to encourage youth into positions of responsibility in the party. I'm not talking about the youth organization. I'm talking about those who've worked in mass organizations and who believe they should be communists, who come to the party. So there we are trying to promote younger people because they also have experience of struggle. They fought on the streets, they fought for youth. So we have to encourage them to join politics and to join left politics. And I think that is a very, very big task before us. We're quite distant from that task right now, but I think we're moving in the right direction. Okay?
So thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for this lovely interview. It was really an honor to interview you, and
Thank you, my dear.
thank you so much,
All
ma'am.
the very best to you.
Thank you so much.